Hello and welcome everyone to the Solo Multimedia Podcast, where I give you my unfiltered take straight off the cuff. And we're going to be continuing with essentially my catch-up series, where I just go over a bunch of records that I didn't get a chance to listen to properly throughout the year. And today I'm going to be talking about the Viagra Boys record Cave World. So this came out quite a while ago, and after being super into the Black Country New Road and Black Midi records, I was definitely eager to try out like more rock and post-punk from the year, because I honestly feel like rock hasn't been super interesting over the last, like, I don't know, 5 years or so. So to see so many rock records really make it, like, really make an impression on me over the course of the year was very encouraging. And this was another one that I heard was, like, just incredibly fun, really good, really unique, loads of personality, and all that good stuff. And, I'm very happy to say that it just absolutely does not disappoint. This is such a wild, brilliant record for the band. I straight up honestly love it. So the way I would describe this record is it's essentially like if Idols and Queens of the Stone Age had a baby that just fucking loved to dance and groove and boogie. Overall, the whole band is like a pretty simple setup. Most of the tracks are just held together with a drum and bass groove, and then the guitars are pretty harsh and distorted, but mostly focused on just like very melodic playing. And the embellishments that give the tracks a lot of the detail come from the electronics and the horns. But ultimately, the real star of the show across the whole record, not to say that any of the other elements are bad by any stretch, they're all great and have energy and are tight and just tons of personality comes through in the playing, but the real star of the show that brings everything together and makes the whole lot make sense is the just incredibly cartoonish, absolutely like downright sardonic vocal performances. One of the really interesting things about this record that I just was not expecting is because it's such a colourful and kind of like over the top in terms of the personality record. I wasn't expecting it to have such a like almost cohesive theme. And I think consistently across this record, you're going to catch lots and lots of lyrics, some of which are just darkly hilarious, others are like just straight up actually kind of dark, but playing over like a really fun groove, so you can't help but have it come across in a very fun, colourful way. But most of the lyrics are just talking about like the breakdown of society, the amount of kind of like arguments and disagreements and distrust there is between different communities, and essentially just perhaps suggesting that we'd all be better off if we reverted to monk and went back to the jungles and just supported each other a bit more and all that good stuff. So right off the bat, the first track, Baby Criminal, just bursts open with this incredibly dirty punk rock groove. I love everything about the intro. It's got this like bustling western bar vibe. There's horns everywhere. The bass riff at the core of the track and the gruff vocals paint this like incredible scene as well. Yeah, it's honestly just like a fucking awesome mission statement for the album. It gives you that kind of like core, very like dancey, four to the floor kind of like drumming. It gives you like the repetitive bass loop that's just got a ton of energy and drive to it. And again, that is more or less going to be the kind of the canvas that everything else is painted on across the entire record. This is a great mission statement for the album. It's a great opening track with a ton of energy. The vocal switch up near the back end is super fucking earwormy as well. So yeah, it's just an awesome track. The second track, Cave Hole, is just a very short interlude, basically. Not much to say on it. It's a good little calm after the storm because the opener is actually like fairly long and is just one hell of a banger. So it's nice to have like just a tiny little, moment to breathe before we go straight into Troglodyte, which is another one of the just most fun songs of the year, honestly. This is probably the most fun you'll ever have listening to a song about an office shooter. It's just got some fucking awesome guitar licks and electronic licks all over the place, making these like bizarre contorted sounds. The core of the tune is just another like groovy, dancey, dirty punk rock tune with tons of swagger. And yeah, just absolute special shout out to the lyrics on this one. They're super sarcastic and very, very like darkly hilarious. But again, it's another kind of like very like reasonably fast-paced, like dancey, full energy, just like go 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 track. So the next song, Punk Rock Loser, I was pretty glad actually kind of like cuts back on the pace a little bit. After two blistering cuts, it's pretty appropriate to have this song that's effectively like a sort of a very melodic, like more mid-paced, but still carrying the MO of your album tune. And I would say this one's kind of packed with like very smoky bass, slightly less exaggerated character in the vocals, and it just ends up being like a super catchy tune with a great hook. I don't know if this was the pingle. Sorry, the pingle. No, I don't know if this was the single for the record, but this would definitely be the obvious pick if I had to pick one. It's just got, a very familiar structure. It's a solid tune with some like good little details here and there. I particularly love the guitar solo towards the end that feels a lot like Josh Homme's guitar playing. So yeah, just another great track. If a little kind of like expected, I suppose. But I definitely can't say that about the next track, Creepy Crawlers. I don't really know how to describe this song. It starts out almost like weirdly bare bones and like quite low key. It's largely driven by this mid-pace slow key bass with a slightly less exaggerated character and it's essentially like, yeah, I just totally okay, just ignore the last like 10 seconds. That I just completely went off on one. My bad. No, this is the song that opens up with these kind of like sparse electronics. It's very like, I wouldn't say quiet ambient, but it's very yeah, just very sparse. There's not like a ton going on. It's more of like a soundscape to set the stage for the absolutely piercing sardonic jab at like anti-vax and conspiracy theorists over just one of the most jarring instrumentals on the entire album when it eventually does kick in. It has a ton of these like strange electronic sounds just whizzing by in the background and a hypnotic drum and bass loop driving the whole thing forward. But again, it's absolutely the vocals that make the track. He's just losing his damn mind singing over the most like in the like most over the top way possible about, creepy crawlers in the vaccine and children growing up with animal hair and lizard skin and all these kind of like deformities. There's a couple instrumental features that I do really like. Like there's these descending guitar melodies towards the end of the track, and once the band does kick in around the halfway point, it does have like a pretty solid groove, but like the absolute core of this song is just the lyrics, and they're just fucking brilliant. Like it's such a funny and poignant song at the same time. It really does stand out in the track listing, and it's one of the strangest songs on the record, but it's definitely a highlight for me. Maybe probably even one of my favorites, honestly. Absolutely great track. So the next track, the Cognitive Trade-Off Hypothesis. So this tune is like another more mid-paced song, very much focused on earwormy melodies. Could be like the other single, I guess you could say. But one thing that is very unique about this track is that it has these like strange lyrics theorizing about a variety of things that go back in our ancestral history and how that's maybe had like a negative knock-on effect, or just a knock-on effect in general, I guess, to our kind of like modern living and mental conditions. I would say this one's particularly dancey, and it has guitar licks that wouldn't be out of place on like a Daft Punk record. But of course they filter it through their own kind of like, gruff, hazy, like punk rocky sound. So yeah, I would say that's kind of like the first half of the record, and with the exception of Creepy Crawlers, I'd say most of those tracks are like, pretty similar. They're all like very fast-paced, pumped up kind of like dancey tunes, Creepy Crawlers being the obvious exception. But I think after this point in the record, it starts to experiment like a fair bit more, which is really like good because I think it adds a lot of welcome variety, even if I do think some of these tracks are maybe like a touch weaker. So to kind of like differentiate the two halves of the record, you've got the second interlude, which is just called Glow Birth. It's another 30-second like little interlude. It features a nice electronic loop with these plucked melodies over the top. It's another nice little break, nothing like mind-blowing or anything, but it does transition very nicely into the next song. And the next song, Ain't No Thief, is a pretty interesting one, actually, because this one, it kind of opens with these like very cutting hi-hats and a very prominent bass loop. The way that these kind of repeat throughout the whole track and are quite cutting and harsh remind me a weird amount of like Nine Inch Nails when they're at the more like western and kind of like dancey, I guess. Once the vocals come in, they come in pretty hard, which sort of separates it a little bit from that comparison, but it's still definitely within that world. And again, yeah, this is just another kind of like pretty pacey dance number with a bit more just of a sinister edge to it. The guitars are particularly distorted on this one, just sound like buzzsaws sitting pretty low in the mix. I'll definitely say it's got one of the better progressions on the album as well, because it just has a ton of interplay between the band and instruments, and loads of forward momentum. It's just absolutely another great fucking tune, like a big highlight as well. The next song, Big Boy, is another big slowdown, but this time not in the same way as like kind of like catchy single track. It's actually probably the most Western sounding track thanks to this like smoky rhythmic bass guitar, bass riff, and like just very gruff yet cartoonish vocals. I would almost compare this to Smoke on the Water in a like modernized way, but with lots of like color as well. It's a solid track, but it's not exactly a highlight for me. It's, again, not to say it's like weak by any stretch, and especially with the back end, because it has one of the Sleaford mods coming on, it just pretty much in his most high pitched register and acting as cartoonish as possible. And with the way that the kind of like electronic elements just elevate the track, it actually really reminds me of something I would expect to hear from a Gorillaz album in like the best possible way. So yeah, again, not like a highlight for me, but I still really goddamn enjoyed it. The next track, ADD, is probably the most electronic track on the album, with like a bassy synth flute as the core, and it's got these electronic drums to boot as well. While the verses are a little bare, while the verses are a little bare, the chorus does like pop off pretty dramatically with another great hook. There's prominent guitars and tons of electronic bleeps and bloops like firing all around, but overall I did find this one probably like maybe the weakest track on the entire record. So I don't have like a ton to say to it. It's just a bit too skeletal, I think. Maybe could have used a bit more time worked on, but it's not a bad track by any stretch. And after that, we get to the final two songs, although one of them is the final interlude on the album. This is probably like the most sparse interlude. There really isn't much to say about it. It does tease the hook for the next track, but that's like the only thing it really does. But fortunately, despite ADD being kind of like one of the lower points on the record, the final track is absolutely one of the strongest, if not the strongest, maybe even honestly one of the best songs of the year. This final track is just the wildest, most raucous track just on the entire record, and it absolutely delivers in every way that this album desires to, just with everything turned to 11. You get a whole bunch of these noisy, just absolutely wild vocal embellishments contorted with a bunch of different effects. There's horns popping off all over the place with bass and drums just holding everything together. But of course, it wouldn't be complete without some absolutely wild, unhinged lyrics and the vocalist just going off, encouraging everyone to go full monkey mode. So the hook in this track is just leave society, be a monkey. And essentially just talking about all the things that we would do. Like, we could go and eat bananas and masturbate together. It's just such a beautifully comedic track that still delivers the message that I think the album is essentially trying to get across for its like very sardonic, sarcastic demeanor. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. I just fucking love this closer. It's catchy, it's detailed, it's hilarious, it ties the record up beautifully. It's got all of the features like super explosive like buzzsaw guitars. It's got tons of like horns and really really memorable like horn sections specifically actually. Yeah, decent electronic like tie-ins as well. Yeah, it's just a fucking great track, absolute rager of a track to close the record off. And honestly, like I said, there really isn't that much to complain about in this record. Maybe there's like one or two tracks that like pale in comparison to others, but overall it's like a decent set of not decent actually, an incredible set of like rages. You've got some like odd little deviations here and there. The core of the record is like definitely very cohesive, but it has just enough variety to keep you interested to the very end. It's 40 minutes in change. That's like a really really just tight listen. There really isn't that much flab here whatsoever. Like, even the tracks I don't like are at least bringing something new to the table, so it's not like their inclusion is just like, oh, it's like the fifth kind of like, I don't know, dancey guitar-led tune that we have on the record, but it brings nothing new to the table. That doesn't really happen here. Maybe in like the first half a touch, but all those songs are just so good that I don't really think it matters all too much. Yeah, in a way I've kind of slept on this record because I remember listening to it a bit when it came out, but not a ton. Just kind of like, oh yeah, it was like a lot of fun, and then I kind of forgot how much fun it was. Came back to it now as I'm going through everything again, and yeah, no, one hell of a record, man. I 100% understand the hype, and if you haven't, I would highly encourage everyone to go listen to it. Just a super fun track. A super fun album. I can't imagine many people that are into this style of music not enjoying it, to be honest. They're playing London in January, and I honestly think it might be one of the best shows of the year, so very excited for that. But yeah, cheers for listening, everyone. That's pretty much everything I want to say about this record. yeah, absolute must listen for the year in my opinion. But yeah, just for listening, stay safe, and I'll hopefully see you all around.